All right, thanks so much to everybody for being here on a Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. This is our Language Arts Standards Proficient training, kind of part two from what we did in our last face-to-face when we focused on assignments and student work. So you did some independent work with the free speech assignment that we gave you, and you have done some of the material already in advance. And so what we're going to do tonight is finish up that discussion and work on the revision of that assignment. And then we're going to give just some last kind of preview information of what might come next after your Proficient training is done. So just a reminder, when you click the green microphone button once and turn it gray, you're muted. If you want to speak and you want to be heard, just click it one more time and it'll go green and then you're live. You can also use the chat box. This is a participatory website, so I expect you to be, jumping in and stuff. So you can do it verbally, you can do it through the chat. Either way is completely fine. I'm also recording this webinar just for the sake of having to share it with one other person. So I just needed to let you know that I'm recording our voices and what's on the screen. Okay, so let's jump in. If you've got any questions along the way, just holler out. I do want to point out, too, that if you don't have your materials right in front of you, which hopefully you do, but if you don't for some reason, under the materials section of your toolbar are all three of the things you would need: the alignment tool, the free speech material, and then the student work. It's all there. So if you have to pull it up so that you can see it on your own screen, you can, if you happen not to have it in print. So if you'll remember this quote that we talked about at our face-to-face training, students can do no better than the assignments they're given. That's kind of the rationale behind why we're bothering to look at assignments. The lesson revision that we worked on the first time we were together in our face-to-face is a really important process. This one narrows into what exactly are the students being asked to do, and what standards are being taught, and what proficiency level is being demanded. And is that what the teacher was after? And so that's what we're doing here with this material. So your independent work, you reviewed the free speech. I call it the free speech assignment. It was the First Amendment, the ABA, American Bar Association article on Facebook, and then the writing prompt. And then you analyze that with steps 1 and 2, and then you analyze the student writing samples and finish step 3. So what we're going to do tonight is reach consensus, or kind of walk through and kind of make sure we're all on the same page for steps 1 through 3. We'll be doing that briefly. And then we're going to complete step 4 together to produce a redesigned assignment. And I'll show you what that looks like at the end. So you'll want your alignment tool that you worked on where your notes are written in front of you. I just will tell you that I have an alignment tool that's already partially filled out, because for me to sit here and type this whole time, everything you guys say would take forever and you'd have to watch me type. And that's painful. Nobody wants to see that. So what we're going to do instead is I've pulled together, out of the 33 participants that I have in my southern and my northern cohorts, I pulled together kind of the majority response for each section. What were most people saying? And I put that down, and then we can add to it or change it as we go. But I am going to work off of that document here right now, and you guys can follow along. You do not have to try to copy everything down that I have on the screen. You can just follow along and kind of enjoy like it's a fun process. You can enjoy our discussion as we go without worrying about writing it all down. So let's start at the very beginning, the alignment tool. Presenting instructor, remember the whole idea of this is that if you were to mimic this use of this tool in your own program, you would be in a critical friends group, and you would be working with other peers, and somebody in your group would bring an assignment and some student work and offer it up for discussion and analysis. So Sarah is the author of this assignment. I happen to know her personally. She volunteered this information for us, which was very generous. And I happen to know that her level of learning that she marked on her assignment was an NRS 6. Now, first things first, how would we have any idea that this was an NRS 6 assignment since it wasn't written down anywhere? Any ideas? How would we have known that she wanted this to be at an NRS 6?
I submitted the document to Lexile.
Yep. And what'd you find?
and I found that it was NRS level 6 because it was a 1300 L to 1400 L.
That's correct. Exactly. Oh, good. Several of you did that. I appreciate that extra little bit of effort. There's not anything necessarily in the alignment tool directions that say, hey, run that text through an alignment or through a text complexity analysis. But it is online, that ABA article. If you just Google the title, it pops right up on the ABA website. And then you can copy and paste it into a Lexile or a readability. Mine came out for Flesch Kincaid at about 11.2 grade level equivalency. So definitely we're dealing with an NRS 6 level text. Now, whether we think that the whole assignment is appropriate for level 6 or not, that's part of our discussion for later when we get to the standards. So we can keep an open mind about that. But certainly we can understand that's what she was aiming for based on her text level. If you didn't do that step, that's totally okay. You might just keep in mind that that might be useful down the road. So let's look at step 1, guiding questions. We're analyzing what students would learn from completing this assignment. I gave you a little tip here on the screen. Obviously, they're learning to develop an argumentative essay using evidence. Many of you put something similar to that. Secondarily, you might have recognized the prompt. If you've been around a couple of years, when the new GED first came out, you remember that the GED social studies test had an essay portion? Anybody remember that? That's what this prompt was styled on, and it was intended to prepare students for that. So even though that portion of the GED test is no longer in existence, it's still a useful activity to develop writing and argumentative skills, so it's still in use in this teacher's classroom, but certainly it had a very specific purpose. Why might an instructor give this assignment? Most of you said something to the effect of this, that students need to be able to read the article, examine how it connects to First Amendment, and then also to be able to explain their position about this First Amendment free speech issue with this one court case. Everybody kind of said something like, teachers give it because it's a good issue, right? It's a relevant issue. Students are interested, something along those lines, which is great. So what about the last 2 bullets at the top of this section about, is it clear what students need to know and be able to do to complete, and are there scoring guidelines? What were some of your initial reactions to those questions, either what you wrote or just off the top of your head? Is it clear what students need to know to be successful? And how about guidelines that were provided?
I would say based off of the assignment itself, if they didn't have any prior assignments leading up to this one, it wouldn't be clear enough.
Okay, so unless we had a whole bunch of stuff preparatory to this, which we don't know, we're assuming it's not clear enough. And Sierra, you said yes to that also?
Yes,
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I myself was slightly lost.
And Ron, yes, I see you, Ron. He agrees that the scoring guidelines are what is missing. What did you guys think about the, some people were calling it a graphic organizer. Some people were calling it a graphic model. It's the little piece that comes right underneath the prompt that kind of shows general introduction, thesis, first argument, second argument. How did you interpret that as being on the assignment sheet under the prompt? What did you think students were supposed to do with this? I'm just curious about your reactions.
I didn't understand why. I mean, I appreciate that there was a structure there. If students were completely clueless as to forming an organized response, I thought that, yes, that was helpful. But if they wanted to have an actual graphic organizer for the students to organize their thoughts, this one is just not enough. I think that it would have helped to have like a blank sheet of paper if that was the intent.
Great. Or something where these shapes were expanded and there was room to take your notes in there, for instance. To draft an actual outline. So, agreed. I had several people calling it a graphic organizer, and I'm okay with that. But in my mind, a graphic organizer means you can write in it, that you're creating a shape of something that will help you present your thoughts in an organized way. And this doesn't translate to that in my mind. So yeah, absolutely. In this case, we've got this idea here that there's no scoring guidelines, and the graphic organizer seems to indicate a structure, but we're not really sure that this is really enough. right? Absolutely agreed. Anything else about the prompt, the instructions that you felt were not clear enough or it didn't do enough to help students be successful? Any other comments related to that you want to share? What else might be missing from that prompt in your mind? Anything else?
Well, what it means, each part of it. So if they didn't have any culminating activities or prior activities to this assignment, they might get lost on what it means. But it is a good, if they already had those, it'd be a good reminder of what is expected for a good essay.
Because certainly we have relevant specific evidence is required. You have to use it to support your analysis. There's a lot of good vocabulary for a writing prompt here. There's a couple of things that several of you noted that are missing, and I wanted to show you here. Yeah, Tanya, you're exactly right on it. Guess what I'm getting ready to show you? My first complaint about this prompt is it doesn't actually tell them to write. It's the same problem that we saw in that Constitutional Convention activity, remember? Where we were looking at it, we're like, is this a discussion or is this a writing prompt? And we couldn't decide. Same thing here. There's actually nothing here that tells you to write. And so I agree with you. That's the first thing I said is tell them it's a writing activity. And then once you've done that, there might be a couple of other things you want to include. For instance, guidance about length, number of paragraphs, how many pieces of evidence should be cited, right? If we assume that these circles in the graphic are paragraphs, we could assume that's a 5-paragraph theme and that there should be 3 pieces of evidence. But again, that's the student really has to infer that. It's not very clearly stated. So those are the things that we might say aren't included and should be for students to need to know what to do to successfully complete. Great. So I appreciate you guys letting me keep some of this already prepped so I don't have to type all this. And again, a lot of it was based on, well, all of it was based on your feedback from all of your combined alignment tools that you sent me. And if you have comments written on yours that don't show up on mine, it doesn't mean they're not valid or correct. It just means it wasn't in the majority, right? And that's totally okay. So that takes us to step 2, where I want to just quickly look at, this is the content standards where we have to choose to best match the assignment's demands. Yeah, and Pat, I think you're completely right. I think we all kind of assume, it's kind of what Steve was hinting at too, that they have to have done this essay writing or something similar to it before. And we would assume that they had used that 5-paragraph format. That's why the teacher put that picture on there. But yeah, we're not 100% sure at this point if they did that or not. But yeah, it's a good assumption to make. So our guiding questions, we choose up to 4 standards that best match the content and the demands of the assignment. And then we have to align, see how those rate, right? Is this a strong alignment, excellent, weak alignment? That's what we're doing here. So I wanted to show you, I went ahead and pulled kind of like the top winners of the standards. And I want to walk through these with you guys and see if we can reach agreement on these. So here they are. First thing you might notice is that it's not level 6, right? We said that the text is written at a 12th grade or 11th to 12th grade level, correct? But most of you, almost entirely all of you, in my 33 people used level 4 or 5 standards. Almost none of you went all the way up to 6. And the reason for that is even though the text is a complexity level of a level 6, the actual writing activity was not at that level. And that was the assumption that many of you made. So for instance, you were finding standards like 5RCI2, where they were required to cite strong textual evidence to support what the text says, including explicit references and inferences. Here's 5RRH1, this is a social studies standard. Cite specific textual evidence to support analysis of primary and secondary sources, right? The Constitution, or excuse me, the First Amendment is the primary, the ABA article is the secondary. Then most of you pulled up at least 1 or 2 writing standards. This 4 level one, write arguments to support claims with clear reasons and relevant evidence. And then many of you wanted this WL1, produce clear and coherent writing in which development, organization, and style are appropriate to task, purpose, and audience. So those were the 4 that kind of got the biggest number of votes. I want to show you one quick thing because I was interested in how these standards shifted back and forth between 5 and 4. And I just want to show you that this is completely appropriate and okay. So 4WTT1 says, write arguments to support claims with clear reasons and relevant evidence. That's completely fine, right? I want you to hear how 5WTT1, the next level up, listen to what gets added. Write arguments using drafting, editing, rewriting techniques to support claims in an analysis of substantive topics using valid reasoning and relevant and sufficient evidence. You hear all that extra stuff in there? There's pre-drafting, editing, rewriting, substantive topics, sufficient. There's a lot of vocabulary in here in this standard that doesn't get addressed in this writing prompt. So in this case, many of you bumped down to 4 because the standard actually matched up with the writing prompt a lot better. So I hope that that's clear and that it's okay that those move around a little bit between levels. And it would be completely fine if all of yours happened to be 4s and you were happy with that. That's okay too. Okay.
This is Rhonda. I had started with all 4s and then I talked myself out of it and kind of bumped up to 5s. But I have both on my alignment wall.
Right.
Because I thought that there was some really good stuff.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you spent the time, you found the 4s, you were working in those, and you thought, wait a minute, maybe this goes up to 5. The more time you spend analyzing and digging through those standards, the more familiar you become with them. And to be honest with you, that's half of the point of doing an activity like this, is that each teacher in the work group who's working together is becoming more familiar with the standards and learning to incorporate them into their lessons and assignments. So to be honest, whether you all agreed or disagreed about the choice of standards at the end, it's the familiarity that you've gained from the analysis that's actually the bigger benefit. So it's win-win as far as I'm concerned. But I did want you to see that difference and that it's okay to have different levels. The one thing, though, that we have to do now is come up here to these alignment descriptors, and we have to say, out of the 4 that we chose, how well aligned are they? Are they weakly aligned, strongly, or excellently? And notice the criteria. The weak means the most critical aspects of that standard don't get asked for in this assignment. Strong would mean the most critical aspects are being asked for, but some of the less critical aspects may not get addressed. And then excellent would mean the whole thing hits it. Okay, so I want to show you kind of my interpretation based on the understanding of these standards plus some of your comments. The first one, cite strong textual evidence to support analysis of what the text says, including explicit references and inferences. That's the whole standard. I gave it a 2, as did many of you. And you know why? Because yes, citing evidence is required, but look what gets left off, the issue about inferences, right? There's nothing in the prompt that tells them, hey, watch out for those inferences, aside from what's being said explicitly. It doesn't get addressed. So the main part of the standard gets addressed, the secondary part doesn't, so it gets a strong. So hopefully that makes sense based on this chart up here. The most critical aspect is being demanded, not the secondary part. Okay? All right. What do we think about 5RRH1, to cite specific textual evidence to support analysis of a primary and secondary? What do you guys think about the rating there? Would you give it an excellent, a 3? Would you give it a 2, a strong, or a 1 and weak? What do you think? You guys can type it in the chat box if you want, or you can shout it out, either way.
So my question, because I'm slightly confused, as far as the expectations of the students or what the students actually executed.
We're still in step 2.
Okay,
So we haven't
all right.
seen the student work yet. Good questions here. No, I'm glad you brought that up. The discussion we're having tonight, we have the benefit of knowing what the students did. But
Right.
in your critical friends group, at the point you get to step 2, you will not have seen that student work yet. So we're talking about the demands of the assignment.
Right. Yeah, I'd have to say probably close to a 2 or something, because this is about interpreting the First Amendment for the most part, if we were to apply what is being discussed, and to well, maybe it's a 3, because it is also to analyze primary sources, including Alanis's Facebook comments and stuff,
Right.
and the secondary
Right.
sources of ABA's interpretations of the First Amendment
Right.
and Alani's actions.
And you kind of talked yourself around to the 3, as most of the people in the chat box have said the same thing. It looks like you kind of all are at consensus. This standard is really short and specific. It's basically, do they have to use textual evidence? Yes. Do they have to use it to support analysis? Yes, that's right there at the very end of the prompt. Do they have to look at both a primary and a secondary source? Yes. So in that case, kind of all 3 pieces of the standard are being required by the assignment. So we would give it a 3, right? Whereas the first one, you noted that the ending part kind of got left off. So we lowered the alignment there. All right, good. What about 4WTT1? Write arguments to support claims with clear reasons and relevant evidence. What kind of an alignment would you give there?
I'd say strong.
Strong, okay. Steve's voting for a 2. Anybody else?
2.
Okay. Guess what? I agreed with you. I also put a 2. And here's why. I said that the standard was well addressed, although there's no specific mention in the prompt about clear reasoning. There is about relevant evidence, but not clear reasoning. So I said that's one piece that kind of got left out. The other thing is that standard actually has an A through an E. And remember how we talked about this is the right arguments to support claims? That statement, that's the top of the standard. And then there's an A through an E. And are they all equally met? Probably not. So in this case, we were looking at B, which is just support your claims with clear logical reasoning and relevant evidence. That's specifically in the prompt. So in this case, if we change this right here to just 1B, we could probably up that rating, right? Yeah, and Ron, look at you. Ron's right on it. He's like, yeah, I like that standard, but only 1B. And that's exactly right, because the other standards are dealing with counterclaims, formal style, using words and phrases to create cohesion. These are not standards that are being dealt with in this assignment. They may be important to you as a teacher that you want to teach them, but in this particular assignment, they're not being addressed. So just 1B, if we change the standard to include just that part, we would probably say it's a really excellent alignment. Great job. Yeah. All right. What about 5WWL3 was another one that I saw repeatedly. Anybody want to take a stab at the alignment rating for that one? Producing clear and coherent writing? Sorry, Steve.
I don't think it was very strong.
Okay. All right. Not strong for Rhonda. What else? Marie, thank you. Marie says, not good. Weak. Yeah. Oh, you guys are so good. Okay. Guess what? So did I. I agreed with you guys completely. And here's my reasoning. Every teacher would love to see this, right? Don't we always want this from our students? But remember, the question is, does the assignment demand it? Does the assignment ask for it? Does the assignment require proficiency in this thing? And no, there's nowhere where it talks about coherence, development, organization, style, audience. Yeah, and Sarah, you're completely right. Is that a stated expectation of written work that this teacher has in her classroom all the time? Possibly. But if this is an assignment that you're going to get shared across your whole department, it needs to be included, right? If you want this standard met. Now, the other thing you might say is, you know what? Well, then I'm going to pull that standard out of there. I don't care about that for this particular assignment. Maybe I just want to focus on the evidence building and the supporting of an argument, and I don't really care about audience and organization and all that right now. If that's the case, you could pull this out completely and just eliminate this from your assignment and keep going. If you want to keep it, you're going to have to add some things to your assignment in order to make this a clearer expectation. Okay? So as long as everybody's okay with that, we're going to keep moving. Make sure everybody's on board with our 4 chosen standards. And again, it's completely fine if the standards you have on your paper don't match these, I was simply pulling the majority. And there are others that are completely relevant as well, although their alignment might not be all threes. Okay. So second part asks about the key instructional advances. How is this text, or excuse me, assignment showing text complexity, attention to evidence, attention to knowledge? This is dealing with, is this assignment appropriately rigorous? Remember, that's what we're after with these 3 key shifts. Are we feeding fluff to our students and getting fluff back, or is this rigorous? So we would say, is the complexity of the text appropriate? Absolutely. We're at an NRS 6 level. This is challenging our students for reading. Does the assignment support students in unpacking any academic language? No. In this case, there's no support included for that. Is there vocab in it that could be addressed? Absolutely. There's no support. So that's an important note that we want to make. Do they have to provide text-based evidence? Yes, that's a clear given. And does it focus on content-rich informational text? Yes. Relevant information, relevant article. Could it be extended into a research project? Heck yeah, they could go on and find out other similar free speech cases. They could look up the Alonis case and find out how it turned out in the Supreme Court. There's all kinds of things that they could do. So certainly it meets all 3 of the complexity, evidence, and knowledge pieces, minus the academic vocabulary requirement. Okay. So I just want to show you this last part is a little bit of a repetition, noting the gaps between the demands of the standards and the assignment. This is kind of like saying, okay, these things that you just said when you rated it and it didn't hit a 3, why? What are that? Those are the gaps, right? So we said that like this, the directions needed to be clearer in order to help students meet this issue of clear and coherent writing and blah, blah, blah. We need to specify that 1B is what's being targeted to make that one a 3. And this one, we need to remind them to look for implicit arguments and reasoning. That will help to make that one. So if we add those 3 things, we will have closed the gaps between what was being asked of the standards and what the assignment was asking for. So hopefully that makes a little sense. I wanted to spend enough time going through that, even though I know it's repetitious. Enough of you had gaps on this page that I wanted to make sure that we all saw how it fit together. Okay, which leads us to step 3, which is the student work sample. So I'm going to show you a couple of different examples of how this could look. This is my interpretation of how I would fill this chart out, and I use a lot of detail. All right, that's me. But I'm going to show you a couple of other examples with a little bit less detail, which are just as good and will work fine. And I want you to see those here in a second. So the student work, remember, you look at one student at a time and you work across the content. How well did they get it? And then how proficient were they with each of the standards? And then did they follow the answer keys? We didn't have one. We didn't have a rubric, so we left that as NA. Here you can see kind of how I indicated. I kind of used just bullet ideas instead of complete sentences. I tended to say things like, the introduction showed some clear understanding. There are some examples being offered. This student uses some reasoning, tries to understand cause and effect. This one, I said the student's response is too much direct quotation, so it's hard to judge if they had any understanding, right? So those are the kinds of comments I was making as I was reading my student work. You'll notice under the second column where you talk about standards, proficiency with the standards, I went ahead and noted a handful of those standards based on which ones I thought were being met or not. So in this case, I would say, hey, that 5 WWL standard isn't getting met because there's no paragraphing. It's all one paragraph. There's little development, etc. I might say, well, you know what? I'm seeing partially 5 RCI was being met because there was an attempt at inferring a motive. So, I was going through there and kind of identifying specific things I thought where there was either no meeting, partial meeting, or completely meeting of a standard. Okay, so you all can see that there. I wanted you to have a chance to look at it, but I also want you to look real quick. Sorry, I shrunk my screen there. I'm going to show you another example here's one. So this person followed a similar idea as I did, where they kind of showed which standard they were finding some alignment with and proficiency with. And they were also making some kind of thoughtful ideas about, I see both sides of the argument being assessed, but not evenly. Or I see some reasoning, but it's not well supported, right? This student number 4, far-reaching conclusions that are just guided by emotion. There's no textual evidence. These are the kind of comments, did the student get? Is there comprehension, right? So I wanted you to see that. It's a little bit less detailed, but still completely accurate, completely acceptable. And then I also wanted to show you, here's one that has even just a little bit less. Here's the idea. Did the student get it? Yeah, there's a basic understanding. They're able to restate. There's some inference going on, right? That's the gist of did they get it or not. And then over here, you'll see comments like there's a superficial demonstration of proficiency, or this one's just restating the arguments. There's a lack of analysis, right? Again, this one doesn't mention these specific standards by code, doesn't have to, but still we get the right idea here of what's being done well and what's missing. Okay? So if everybody's okay with that, I just wanted to show you those brief explanations of how that might look so that you get an idea. Okay? Again, your comments don't have to match anybody's. Your opinions can be of your own. Remember though, notice it's not negative towards the students in any way. It's not poking fun at their inability to, use punctuation or whatever. And in fact, there's no such thing as a concentration in grammar or punctuation in any of these standards we're looking at anyway. So that's really not what we're evaluating. So that's another good thing to keep in mind. So then, ideally, all of those steps would happen independently. You as a teacher would be kind of doing that analysis on your own, and then you would bring all of your stuff to your critical friends group, just like we're doing right now, and we would work collectively to look for patterns of student responses, common errors, what knowledge seems to have been gained and what still needs to be learned, that sort of thing. So I'm going to show you a couple of the most common comments that I saw from you guys. First things first, many of you pointed out that the students can make a claim. They know how to make a claim, but boy, they don't provide enough evidence to help develop an argument to support that claim. That's where the gap is. They can make a claim, they can state an opinion, but they don't develop the argument with evidence very well. I saw that comment repeatedly across all of you guys' stuff, and I think that's completely accurate. Okay. Were the students able to make a reference to the 2 primary, secondary? Yes, they were. Everybody did it, at least to some extent, some better than others, but that's a positive that we saw across the student work, a sample. And here's another important one that I wanted to share, that the goal of the assignment was to apply your reasoning to this issue, this constitutional issue. But most of you said something like it was a very shallow attempt, right? That the amount of writing that was done, the amount of thinking that went into this doesn't really allow for ample depth of reasoning to explain a concept this complicated, like free speech and Facebook and violence and assault, all these other things that come into it. So I saw those 3 comments very repeatedly. Any other things that you have maybe on yours or that you want to make a note of? Issues that you saw that were common to many students or that you saw across the board, things that you think we need to make observation of?
I don't want to jump the gun into step number 4 because I have a feeling I'm about to, but what if the students had a better preliminary comprehensive understanding of the First Amendment and how it, like maybe a discussion before their writing prompt of how the First Amendment could be interpreted in reflection of the law.
All right, so I'm going to take exactly what you said and I'm going to keep you from doing the thing you said. And I'm going to phrase what you've said as an observation as opposed to a change, all right? So students seemed not to have a deep enough understanding of the First Amendment.
Yeah.
and need, maybe we want to say discussion, prep, pre-teaching, right? Something needed to be done to get them ready for that.
Yeah, and not necessarily an in-depth. It's more of a whole gauging their understanding of what the First Amendment is. If the teacher needs to follow up,
Yes.
I'm probably getting into step number 4. I'm going to hold on to it. Never mind.
Yes, you hold on to it because you're at the very bottom of our redesign page. There's a box just for you, Sierra. So we're gonna come back to this, but I think what you're saying is, remember, this is a place where we make notes and observations on patterns that we're seeing. And the pattern you're seeing is students don't seem to have a deep enough understanding of the First Amendment. You're seeing that pattern. So I think it's great to make the observation right here. And then what we do with it, yeah, we can get to that on the redesign, but perfect.
I'll hold on to it.
Okay, anybody else have one that they want to add? Any other observation they want to make or comment about the student work samples that's not already on here? If something comes to you, you can always jump in when we get to step 4. There'll be plenty of time. I do want to show you, there's an issue that didn't get brought up right now, but it did come up on several of your comments, which is this, the heavy reliance on direct quotes. Many of you made a comment about that on step 3 on the student work chart. And so I just want to bring it up here because clearly that's something that could involve some instructional guidance from the teacher there. The other thing I will point out that several people put, and again, they were looking at that picture on the bottom of the prompt, and they were saying students were not following the graphic. If that's what the graphic was intended to do, introduction, 3 main points, concluding paragraph, students were not following that. And again, we may say, well, we're not 100% sure that's what was intended. This is just an observation that we're making. Okay. So those are our observations. If we're okay with those, what that leads us to is the redesign of the student work. So I want you to, I apologize, I had all this stuff set out and ready to go and it moved on me. This is the redesign. In your packet, this page is green. It's a 2-sided green sheet. It's called the redesigned assignment. You put the title of the assignment. In this case, I'd put, free speech. Which standards are being addressed. This is literally where you can just take the standards one at a time and you can just pull them right off of here and move them over to that other document. And what you're doing is you're saying, these are the ones that we're covering, right? So, and you can make it look nice and pretty. I'm just going to do it quickly for tonight's purposes. But the idea would be that you're showing any teacher who picks this redesigned assignment up could then take this and use it, okay? And this is also the place on this front page with the standards that we might make a note that here we're changing this to B, right? We might make a note here that we need to add further instructions to meet this one, right? Something like that. So we're putting that on the front, and then on the back, this is where we have 2 boxes. There are 2 things happening here. One, you're going to write the actual redesigned assignment. So if you're changing the directions, if you're rewriting a prompt, or you're adding information to an assignment for instructional purposes, that's what goes in this first box. So first things first, we're adding a rubric because I heard you guys say that repeatedly, right? That's going to happen. So whatever that looks like, it's going to be attached to this redesigned piece of paper when it goes back to the lead instructor, right? So we know we're doing that. Anything else we're going to do to actually change that, what's on that yellow sheet, to change the prompt, to change the instructions? What are we going to do to redesign based on some of our comments that we've already made or what you have on your notes?
I have a way to cite quotes.
Yeah, I have that on here, Steve. In the prompt, somehow tell them that they have to cite correctly, right? They've got to include some sort of quotation process, right? Perfect. Yes, Ron, somewhere in there, tell them that they're writing right? They're writing this response. So that comes first. Yep, perfect.
Have a graphic organizer they can write on.
Perfect. All right, we're going to change the graphic organizer they can write on, in or on, or however we want to say that, to organize thoughts, right? That's the whole idea. Perfect. All right. Anything else we're going to do to try to make this clearer or better?
How about something that? Oh,
Go ahead.
Something that shows more detail on what is required of them to make the paragraphs.
Okay, so not only the scoring group, but we want to include information about length, number of paragraphs, etc. Perfect. Yeah.
And on that, maybe include a more evenly argued essay as far as exploring both sides of the issue, because in the written assignment for the official RLA test, they're expected to do that.
So we could, as an option, provide a second article presenting other side of the argument for analysis. And this is an HSE test skill, right? That's the idea, that we would be presenting that for a reason. Great.
One thing that I kind of questioned was she cites a generalization, and in 5 RCI2, we want to make as well as inferences. So could we state more of a conclusion instead of a generalization, possibly? Something along those lines?
And she's pointing to, Rhonda's pointing to the little graphic on the bottom of the prompt, where in the final concluding paragraph, she uses the word generalize. And we're saying here, maybe include a closing idea as opposed to generalization, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. And again, you may think to yourself, well, I don't, can we change? Yes, that's the whole point. We're changing. We can change the wording. We can change anything that we think we need to. The one thing that I would suggest that you do if you're working for real, right? And I say for real in quotes, but you're in your critical friends group, what you're actually going to do is hand this redesigned assignment, this green sheet, that once you finish, you're going to hand it back to the teacher who wrote the assignment in the first place. So he or she can make it complete and perfect the way they want it, and then distribute it back out to you guys as a whole department, right? So these notes go back to the teacher. So as complete as you want to be in this box and as detailed as you want to be, it just means the assignment's going to come out as the way you want it. So what I would suggest you do is type that new prompt exactly the way you want it, type it out word for word right here in this box, and send that with the teacher. We're not going to take the time to do that right now just because it takes time and we don't have time. But that's what you would do. You would type it out exactly the way you want it to appear. You guys have done a really nice job of bringing over your comments and analysis from steps 1 through 3 and getting them over here onto this page, which is good. That's another thing you might want to remember to do, is go back and double check. Now that takes us to our instructional approaches. This is where Sierra gets to jump in at this point, because she had a great idea, but I wouldn't let her bring it up because we were on the wrong page, which is very structured of me. But here's where what we're saying, just as a reminder, this section says, okay, teachers who are going to teach this assignment, not just these redesigns that we've done to the assignment, but we would recommend you also do blank before you give it, right? I suggest you scaffold this way. I suggest you try this instructional piece or try this activity before you teach this assignment. So, Sierra, go.
Okay. Alrighty. So what I would do is I would encourage the students to read the article, and I said we're going to have before they read the article, I would say, okay, what is our understanding of the First Amendment? And usually, in my experience with my students, they're pretty good about raising their hand, and they're usually pretty spot on. They can piece together the five parts of the First Amendment, the freedom of press, and they're pretty good about doing that. And so what I would encourage after that, once we've established what it is, and then we can look at the First Amendment together, what appears at the top of that assignment. And then I could say, all right, so before you read the rest of this, let's explore the implications that are held when you post things to Facebook. What is your freedom of speech then? Are there certain limitations? And so then it's more of kind of a, before we present the actual scenario at hand, it's kind of exploring the topic and being able to have a discussion about what we think of it, so that as the students go in, they don't feel completely blindsided by what they would define as legalese and just a little bit of intimidating text.
Perfect. Okay, so if we do that, if we follow the model that Sierra just presented to us, what we're doing is we're presenting a possible instructional approach to a teacher. And we're saying, after we have analyzed this thing and we've analyzed the student work that happens as a result of this prompt, we think this piece is missing. That's what we're saying as a Critical Friends group. We're saying it's a great activity, it's a good assignment, but we think you would benefit and your students would benefit by doing this before you give the assignment. And that's all we're saying here. So did the teacher do this? We don't know, maybe, but we're saying it definitely needs to happen, right? It's a perfect suggestion of what would go under instructional approaches, okay? Anything else that you think we should include as an instructional approach? What needs to be taught or done with students before they get to this activity?
I would do vocabulary ahead of time with my students. Most of mine would struggle with some of the vocabulary in this.
Great. And that can be done lots of different ways, right? But however you choose to do it, that would be a great approach to assist your students, a nice scaffold for them.
How about how to make a 5-paragraph argument essay?
Okay. So, and again, we're saying a teacher, she may have already done that, but we're saying definitely before you get ready to teach this assignment, you better have done this, right? That's a great one. Pat has said, if you're going to use this reading, right, if you're not going to simplify, you're going to use this text, then it would be helpful to read it as a group and have the teacher add comments, definitions, explanations as they're reading through it, which I think is a great scaffold for the reading. Thank you. Great. Just making sure I'm catching everybody here. Yeah, how to cite evidence. Ron mentioned this one here, which I've got also. How to cite the information properly. We don't have that in here yet, but we think that would be a good piece of information to provide in advance. Steve?
Oh, I was just going to say, if they were going to use other articles, perhaps find them in advance so the students could see, or maybe an activity that shows you how to find websites that are reliable. Okay.
So that might almost be an extension activity, right? Like
yeah.
For alternate essays on this topic. Great. Perfect. All right, so you get the idea here. Not every teacher is going to take every single one of those instructional approaches and cram it into their lesson, right? But as Rhonda said, my students would benefit from that vocab pre-teaching. So she's going to do that one. Somebody else might look at this and say, you know what, citing information, accurate citations, my students aren't there yet. I'm not going to worry about that. Do you see what I mean? You can pick and choose from these instructional approaches based on your teaching needs, your student needs. So This redesign of the assignment at the top is going to happen necessarily. The instructional approaches are optional, but they're recommended. We are the experts. We've analyzed this assignment from backwards to forwards, and this is what we think would help. And then teachers can take it or leave it. Hopefully, they will take it. Okay, so those pieces together make up the redesign, and that piece of paper then gets handed to the designing instructor, and he or she walks away, does some work with it to make it complete, and then maybe emails it back out to you as a group, and you can share it amongst yourselves and make sure everybody benefits from a really good aligned assignment. All right, so how are we feeling? Everybody's okay so far? We're almost done. You guys are doing fantastic. We will be done at 7. I'm just telling you that right now. We have 8 minutes. We're going to finish in plenty of time. So I want to move ahead to the very last thing, which is your culminating activity. This is the very last thing that you'll do for us for Standards Proficient training, is to complete and submit this culminating activity. As soon as we get off, I'm going to send you an email with instructions that say, here's the assignment, do this, and send it back to me this way by this date, right? You'll have it all on one piece of paper. It's coming in an email, and it will have attached to it the documents that you need to complete it. Okay, so you can probably guess what it is. It's the culminating activity based on focusing on assignments and student work. It's exactly the model that we've used every other time when we gave you a tool. We worked through it together, then you did somewhat independently and we reviewed it, and then you did an independent activity. Same thing. This is your culminating. You're going to choose an authentic student assignment that you have created or used with adult ed students. This does not mean a lesson plan. This is just the assignment. It can be as simple as this free speech one, one pager, or it could be something more complicated like the Constitutional Convention assignment, whatever, or anything in between. You only need the assignment that students were given. I don't need the lesson plan. Notice this comment here at the top in parentheses. If you're not currently teaching, and that may be true for many of you right now, maybe your class has already ended, or you're not in the classroom right now, you can borrow and use an assignment and student work from one of your colleagues. Or if you have an old one of your own, you can also use that. I'll give you some suggestions for how to do this here in just a second. Step number 2, you collect samples of student work that are completed in response to that assignment, right? And we want to see at least 5 work samples if we can, just like we did on the free speech item. If you only have 4 students that show up the day you did that assignment, and you have 4, that's fine. But if we could have 5, that gives you a good cross section to look at. It could be an assignment that you're giving right now in your current classroom, or it could be a previous one, as long as you have both what you gave the students, meaning the directions, instructions, assignment, you've got that, and you have the original student work, at least 4 or 5 samples. As long as you have that, it can be from as old as you want it to be, okay? You don't have to create something new to use. It could be something you're doing next week that you already have prepared. You're going to do exactly what we did with this free speech assignment. You're going to use the alignment tool and do steps 1 and 2 and analyze it and analyze the standards you think are being addressed without looking at the student work. Then step 4 there, you're going to use the student work and look at the work samples and complete the table. And then you're going to redesign it with your notes from step 4. And you're going to finish that redesigned assignment page, that 2-page green one, you're going to finish that up. It's due on Friday, May the 4th. If you need an extension, you may absolutely have one. You just need to email me and ask, and that's fine, as long as I know what's going on. There's a Dropbox link to send it to. If for some reason you have a difficulty uploading it to the Dropbox link, just turn around and send it to me in an email. That's okay. Notice the only things that I need are these 3 things at the bottom, and this will be in the email, but just as a reminder, I only need to see the original assignment, so that I know what you originally asked for from your students. I need to see the completed step 3 chart where you put your notes about what students had done on the work. And then I want to see the green redesigned assignment page. That's it. I don't need to see the samples of student work. I don't need to see the rest of the alignment tool steps. I only want to see the original assignment, your notes about the student samples, and the redesign. And that's it. That should simplify your life a little bit. You don't have to scan a bunch of student work into me. Some people choose to do it anyway just because they want me to see the student work. And I will tell you, I love it when people do that because I read it all and I think it's cool and awesome. But it's completely not required, okay? We're going to go simple, simple if we can for you. So that redesigned assignment that you see right there on the corner of your screen, that's the form that's going to be included, okay? Oh, that number on that slide is wrong. That should say step 3. Sorry. You want to turn in the original assignment, step 3 on the chart, which is the student work step, and then this redesign. I need to change that. Okay, so I'll send that email out, and it'll go out to you. And again, if you need an extension, you're going to email me. If you have difficulty locating a colleague who will loan you some student work and an assignment, don't fret, okay? Don't get into like, I'll tell you what I tell my son all the time. Don't get worked up. Come and talk to me. So that's what you're going to do too, okay? If you get into a situation where you're like, I don't have a good assignment with authentic student work and I can't find anybody to give me some, you're going to email me and then we're going to figure something out. Okay. Couple of last minute things, resources from this training, and by this training I mean the entire Standards Proficient training you have been through for language arts. Every single tool and resource and website that we have used in this training is at that link right there on the screen. That bit.ly/LA resources, it's all there. It's basically a Padlet, which is like Pinterest for geeks, basically, and it's just a place where you can put up all kinds of resources. And it's a very simple list, but it has everything on it that we've done. The RFK speech, the free speech.
Can you email us that link?
I will. I'll put it in the email. This is what it looks like when you open it. Everything that we've done, including the academic word finder, the readability sites, the standards themselves, everything is on here, okay? Including the alignment tools that we just finished during our webinar. I've got that up there too, so you can see it all. So that is there. I encourage you to use that and use it as a reference point in case you don't ever have your binder like carrying it with you all the time. This is an easy way. So save that to your bookmarks and use it as often as you like. So the only thing I want to tell you about before we finish up is the next thing that happens after Standards Proficient training, which is specialist training. Specialist training is optional. It is not a requirement that you complete and move on the instructional professional pathway. ICCP does not require specialist training. It's there as an option for you. So if you'll remember on your pathway, which you have in your chart, it's in your binder, specialist is kind of the next column over from Standards Proficient. If you're interested in doing that, what will happen is when we open those cohorts in the fall, you will get an email because you are a trained Standards Proficient language arts instructor. You're going to get an email about language arts specialist training and say, hey, it's optional. We're starting a cohort. Here's how many hours we're going to meet and what dates, and do you want to do it? And you can say to me in a reply, yes, I do. Tell me more. You can say not at this time, thank you. Or you can say, I am not interested in specialists at all. Whatever your response is totally fine, and that'll help me know whether I should leave you on my email list or take you off, okay? So that'll happen. There will be some innovations that we'll study. We'll look at how to align a resource, how to make a resource, a textbook, more fully aligned to the standards, and we'll look at observing the standards in action in a classroom. And specialists have lots of roles. They do a lot of neat things on their instructional teams at their programs, and we'll talk to you about how you can apply your expertise as a trained specialist, how you can apply that to your role at your institution. And that can involve coaching and mentoring other teachers. It can involve providing observation. It can involve evaluating and recommending purchase of textbooks. It can be a lot of different things. So we do work with some completely different tools and activities during specialist training. And if you enjoyed this one, I think you would enjoy specialist. If you did not enjoy this as much and you're thinking, oh, I don't know, a specialist is kind of this a little bit less time, but it's just as intensive in terms of the analysis that goes on. So you can ask me any questions that you have about that if you want some more information. Again, those cohorts won't roll out until the fall, so you have some time to think. So culminating activity, watch your email. That's going to come from me, and then eventually you'll see information about a specialist cohort and that you can choose to participate or not. I'd love to have you. I would enjoy working with you again. And again, just send me an email if you want to ask questions about it. So this is the last time we're going to be quote unquote together for Standards Proficient. So I just want to say thank you to you all. It's been a real pleasure working with you and getting to know you. And just if anything I can do for you in the future, you have my email. Just keep it and keep me posted on how I can assist. Especially if you need help with your culminating, let me know. Otherwise, you guys have one last step, and then your credential will be on its way. So congratulations and thanks again. Did we finish at 7? Oh, it's 7:01. All right. Have a good night. You guys are all finished. Thanks so
Thank you,
much.
Anita.
Good
It was
to talk
very
to you guys.
enjoyable.
Good. Nice to see you again, Rhonda.
Thank you.
Sure.
You have a good evening.